What do you think is the biggest fault we have in our system, especially with our legal system? So when we talk about the law, the popular questions that arise are, why does a man have to commit an offence? What makes him to do that? How does he get punished for the same? In fact, how do you think the victims get compensated? You know, it's always being wondered whether the so-called punishments that the offenders receive were enough, and is there any possibility that the real culprits aren't getting punished? So there's a possibility that the real culprits might not be getting punished all the time. Does this mean innocent people get punished too? That they have to go through all the legal proceedings, imprisoned for almost the good years of their life, and that too for doing nothing? It's cruel and so mean that those innocent people have had to lead a pathetic life inside of prison for doing nothing wrong. Let's see how many of the innocent convicts react to being set free from whatever hellhole they've been through. Here are some of the cases where the convictions were overturned. Henry McCollum and Leon Brown. Guess what these half-brothers had gone through? Henry McCollum and Leon Brown. They were teenagers when they got arrested and wrongly convicted of rape and murder. The case nearly destroyed their entire life. Both of them were intellectually disabled and were imprisoned for over 30 years. It was later, in 2014, the court finally identified that both of them were innocent under the DNA evidence produced. It was identified that a man that lived nearby their house had committed similar crimes in the same year as the case. Finally, when they were discharged, they told the court how they were coerced to make the confession, which cost them the best years of their life. They were discharged in 2014. In May 2021, a respected jury awarded them $75 million as compensation for the mean injustice they had to suffer. From the very beginning, their constitutional rights were violated, which led them to gain a large settlement. Randolph Arledge. The story of this case amounted to 99 years of imprisonment. So, for nearly being sentenced to 99 years in the year 1984 for the murder of Carolyn Armstrong, Randolph Arledge never failed to believe in him. He made it his mission to achieve his freedom. How did he get caught? He was arrested by a false witness testimony made by two of the co-defendants in the suit. The suit was that the accused happened to be in an armed robbery. While committing the robbery, the witnesses saw him stabbing Carolyn. What changed the whole scenario was that one of the witnesses claimed later that they had a personal grudge against Randolph, and confession would give them a leniency in their sentencing. Later, Randolph Arledge was proved innocent with the help of the Innocence Project, with a profound evidence of DNA linking some others who had done the murder. Finally, Randolph was released at the age of 58 years in 2013, after spending 14 years of imprisonment. Marvin Anderson. This is Marvin Anderson, a volunteer firefighter. Guess what he was imprisoned for? The then 18-year-old was falsely identified by the victim by showing his photo. He was sentenced to 201 years in 1982 for the utmost severe crime which he had never done. The victim identified only him from the line displayed before her. In order to prove his innocence, he got the support from the Innocence Project in 1994. He told this step when the court refused to vacate his conviction, when John Otis Lincoln confessed with the entire details of the crime, including how the rape kits and the evidences were destroyed. Later, he was awarded a parole but couldn't enjoy his freedom due to the label he got as a sex offender, and he had to keep an ankle monitor. This clearly took off his only job, which was his dream. With all due policies, Anderson's lawyers were able to get access to the DNA evidence, which resulted in proving him innocent after serving 15 years behind bars and another 4 years on parole. Muhammad Aziz and Khalil Islam. This is a bit intriguing, as this man, Muhammad Aziz, is waiting for his family and lawyers who finally get to see him after being released from his imprisonment. These men, Muhammad Aziz and Khalil Islam, were arrested for the execution of human rights activist Malcolm X and had served 20 years for Aziz and 22 years for Islam before being released on parole. They still fought to prove their innocence before the court to erase the wrong that had happened to them. During that, systematic racism was more prevalent than ever, which indeed was a negative to their case. And later in 2021, then Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance moved to vacate the men's convictions, citing newly discovered evidence and the failure to disclose exculpatory evidence. The whole act of innocence was questioned after Vance had seen the Netflix documentary Who Killed Malcolm X. This indeed questioned by placing a lot of inquiry to be conducted in order to get deeper information into Aziz and Islam's case. After 2 whole years of investigation, they finally found out that there were serious, unacceptable violations of the law and public trust, according to Vance. In the end, they were awarded with $40 million for the misconduct they had suffered from the FBI. John Bunn. This is John. He spent nearly 27 years of his life in prison for something he hasn't done. This man was wrongfully convicted for a murder. He claimed himself to be innocent and pledged to be innocent. This man was arrested while he was a kid at 14 years of age by NYPD detective Louis Scarcella. He still continued to fight to prove his innocence. And finally, his conviction was overturned in the court that he was convicted due to the act of the detective Louis. You may see that there weren't enough files to arrest Bunn in the first place, but the law couldn't protect his innocence. Instead, innocence was left for imprisonment. Before leaving the court, Bunn had a moment with the judge crying. Later, he filed a lawsuit against Detective Louis. Ricky Jackson. For years, this man was convicted to imprisonment for a murder which he hasn't committed. He was just 18 years old at the time when he got arrested in Ohio. Look at how heartbreaking this is. A boy treated to a murder at an age during which one starts to learn. The main witness to this was a 12-year-old kid named Eddie. In fact, Eddie didn't see anything. It was the police who forced the kid to forge witness data. Jackson was sentenced to die on an electric chair. During the same period, he spent almost 2 additional years. He was later reduced with his sentence in prison. Now the 52-year-old came out projecting the truth on how he was forced to say those things. This drops the atom bomb that Jackson needs to be released from the prison, and he is finally out there with his family at least. Louis Vargas. This man spent 16 years of his life in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. He was 29 years of age whilst living in Los Angeles, California. He was charged with 3 sexual harassment along with the same description. At this point, the police concluded that all 3 of the crimes were committed by the same person. For the same, Vargas was arrested. He spent 16 years of his life in the prison until one day the California Innocence Project started with a DNA test for the case by using the remaining evidence, the clothing or whatever they had. The DNA did not match with Vargas, resulting in Vargas not being the culprit. In fact, he was innocent with the right amount of evidence. He remained silent when the court announced him to be innocent of all the crimes. Reportedly, he received $886,000 in state compensation. Clemente Aguirre. So this is Clemente Aguirre, who was convicted to death for committing double murder, which indeed he hasn't done. Nobody except his mother believed him. Aguirre went to the house of the dead the same night they were killed asking for a beer. Indeed, this made him the prime suspect. He didn't call the police regarding the murder as he was scared because he was an immigrant, but in the end, he was the convict. Later, the case was put under the DNA test, which clearly helped Aguirre. He was finally declared not guilty after 14 years of his life. Reportedly, he received $720,000 from the state for a wrongful conviction. This is a real embarrassment for our whole system, with which people who are actually responsible for the crime are walking freely while the innocent are imprisoned. This due negligence cannot be entertained, and grateful that there are many organizations are present to save the innocent. In a recent record, according to the Chicago Tribune, the wrong convictions lie between 2 to 10%, and we have an estimated 46,000 to 230,000 innocent people serving time for a crime they did not commit. So this is what happens when the innocent are convicted wrongfully. Hopefully you liked this video. For more, do like the video, share, and subscribe to this channel. Do you know any innocent people convicted for something they haven't done? Let us know in the comments section below.